Hi everybody, my name is Pia from piaattenzione.com and I would like to welcome you to my new little project, CultureCurious, which aims at nothing less than creating a mutual understanding between the cultures and doing my own little bit for world peace. In this first episode, I'm joined by my friend Ankita, who I met many years ago when we were both studying at the University of Warwick, through our beloved mutual friend, John. Hi, John. Ankita now lives in Mumbai and is rocking the world of economics there. And today she will share with us her experience of living in her home country, India. So, hi, Ankita. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Pia. It's a pleasure, and I'm delighted to spend this afternoon with you. The series you've started really questions how we are all bound by the same social fabric, irrespective of the countries we live in. And I'm delighted to be the first one on the show. I'm sure it will get a lot of eyeballs and it will make its own small change in the world. So thank you for having me again.
Fantastic. When people think about India, what do you think are the three things that come to their minds? And on the contrary, what is that comes to your mind when you think about India?
So when I think people think about India, they think about Bollywood, and not just Bollywood as in movies. There's probably a perception that Indians live their lives the same way. So, I mean, it's obviously not true that we only wear saris and kurta. If that was true, Zara sales wouldn't have been clocking up in India. Or we listen to, Hindi music only. As a data point, every time Justin Bieber, Coldplay, Ed Sheeran has tried to have a concert in India, they got sold out in 24 hours. So that's the craze in the youth of India for the Western music also. And I think also when it comes to dance, no, Punjabi or Bhangra is not our only dance form. We have way more dances and we are as inclined to salsa and moonwalking and all of it as we are to our traditional dances. And again, language. Hindi is not the official language or the only language that India speaks. India speaks about 22 different languages and thousands of dialects. So the whole scene that's been shown in a typical Bollywood movie in terms of language, music, dance, all those barriers just fall apart when you live here and see it from an internalist perspective. The second thing I think is food. Indian food is considered extremely spicy. It is true. I do not deny the fact that, if we were to compare it on a Western palate, some of our renowned dishes are more spicy. Having said that, our daily food is like a rice, a bread, and a lentil curry. And some, vegetable saute. That's traditionally what most Indians eat for lunch. It's fairly a balanced diet. There is no extra chili or spice. I mean, rice is obviously steamed. The bread has no spice. The lentil curry has no chili. So, the food, when we eat it on day-to-day basis, we are not challenging our intestines on day-to-day basis, of course. And we have a variety of desserts, drinks, and all of it. So, and the third thing which I learned during my time at Warwick is that probably India is considered a poor country. I don't think that's entirely true. I think a lot of Westerners just watched the movie Slumdog Millionaires or one of those, which, showed India's poverty. But I mean, if as a data point, let's say if we talk about number of millionaires, I think India has fourth highest numbers of millionaires. So I think US is about some 600, China has 400, Germany has about 100 something, and India again has about 100 something. So in our country, I think the Gini coefficient is quite high. So the inequality is quite high, but the richness, the level of wealth, the way people live their lives, I mean, the number of German cars imported in India or Scotch whiskey consumed in India is very high. So, it's not really a third world country when you step into the metros or the cosmopolitan cities in India. I look at my country, I think for me, India is about diversity. I think I cannot think of India as a one country when it comes to culture. So, everyone's like, India must be a really hot country. And I'm like, no, that's not true, because, if you go far up north, you are in Himalayas, which are snowing at least for 6 months in a year. So that is very cold. And then our western part is Rajasthan, is like desert there. So, the desert is hot. It's got just sand there. And then like the southern and northeastern parts, which are probably more tropical, they have greeneries and rains and all of it. And we have seasonal changes. That's how I vision India, which is being a very diverse country, I think.
Yeah, thanks for those insights. You already tackled a lot of stereotypes that were also playing on my mind before I read more and I talked more with my Indian friends about their country and their culture. I think another thing that really determines culture is what are the values of our upbringing, what do our parents teach us, maybe also our grandparents. And I think it would be really interesting now to learn the values you were brought up with and which ones are very important to you, which ones do you still hold close to your heart?
I think the number one on list is spirituality. I mean, generation after generation, religion has evolved for us. But I think India as a country is still very religious. And I think the younger generation is probably more spiritual. Maybe we are not worshipping gods the ancient ways in terms of, idol worship, but we're still very inclined towards meditation, yoga, just connecting with the energy that exists outside of us. So I think being spiritual and being taught spirituality since childhood has really helped in, keeping myself calm, mentally calm in times of turbulence. The second, I think, is respect. So, I mean, there's a saying that your parents are your God. I mean, I'm not going to that extreme, but, just the inherent, the inherent ability to respect the elders, I think it helps. It just helps in, it gives you the ability to learn more. Only when you respect people can you learn from them. And we've been forced taught to respect. So, it has a flip side of its own. And the third, I think, is, I already mentioned the diversity, but I think there are a lot of Indians. We are like a country of 1.3 billion, which basically means there's a lot of competition for our limited resources, be it our government jobs, be it our private sector jobs, be it anything. So in a good way or bad, Indians always face this competition to, work harder to be able to make it to that place, because obviously resources are very limited and there's so many people around and you have to really work hard to get to the top.
Where do you see the biggest difference between your generation now and your parents' generation?
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we all know India is a developing country, and I think the normal growth cycle for a developing country is a lot changes very quickly. So, once you reach a particular stage of development, your curve tends to flatten out. But when you're still growing, there's a lot of change. So I think 10 years back, I think all parents wanted were to be settled in a government job per se, because private sector wasn't that active in India. As we speak today, McKinsey's and BCG's and Bain's of the world have their offices, their front-end offices in India. My father, he stuck to his job for for whole of his life, he was in one job. And he never thought of quitting, because being salaried employed back then was a privilege for him. When I look at it, I look at my friends, they are way more enterprising. We are all working in private sectors. We all work. We do respect our work, but we're okay to, quit and move on and take some other opportunity. So over time, once our basics have been sorted, once we know we have XYZ standard of living, our risk appetite has increased a lot as Indians, and especially for this generation. So we want to venture abroad, we want to start our own startups, we are okay with quitting jobs, we are okay with like flip-flop lives. That wasn't there some 20 years back. People were looking for more stability and they were just thankful for the little share of resources they had. Apart from that, obviously the upcoming generation is shrugging off the superstitions. It's basically being able to think more scientifically, and it's making its own judgments about what it's doing. So we are more free and liberated and independent in that sense now.
To be honest, this sounds a lot like the generational conflict that I'm experiencing, and I think also my friends and my peers in this age group is experiencing. And I would almost say it's like a phenomenon of the millennials generation having a lot of opportunities, having a very dynamic mindset, because once we can have it, but also we have to have a dynamic mindset. We are typically in our jobs for a couple of years, or at least in our roles, before we move ahead, because we know this is how we progress. So my next question would be about traditions. From my Bollywood knowledge, I know that Indians like to celebrate a very expensive and glamorous wedding. We don't have to talk about weddings here, but I'd be interested in finding out which tradition just doesn't make any sense to you.
Yes, Indian weddings are a little expensive. There is no denial. I think so are the Greek weddings, with little I know. But yes, not gonna deny that. I think there is still a lot of excitement in getting your ward married off, because of which parents save a lifetime. Having said that, traditions, I don't think is a tradition is the right word for things that don't make sense to me. It's rather the superstitions. So I will give you 2-3 funny ones. I'm sure you'd be happy to disagree with them. So there's this superstition that if you're driving and a black cat crosses the road, you are cursed. So literally people wait until some other car passes by. Imagine that. Men are told not to cut their hair on Saturday, and I think also Tuesday, but definitely Saturday for sure, because it's some god's day, and the god won't be happy if you cut your hair. There's 2 days in a month when you're told not to eat rice because it's not good. Menstruating women cannot worship. So obviously these are some of the, I wouldn't call them tradition, I would call them superstitions. They do not make sense to me. I just find them funny and I just shrug them off. I think like most of the millennials these days.
I think what would also be interesting to understand is, how do you spend a typical Saturday or a typical weekend? And I'm curious to find out if there are also a lot more similarities between how people in Germany or Switzerland like to spend their weekend and young people in India like to.
Yeah, this question is extremely interesting, but there's a caveat to it. Weekends pre-COVID looked much different than weekends look now. But I mean, there are a few things which have obviously been constant. But yeah, pre-COVID, I would love to travel. So at least, if not weekly, then twice a month, I would venture out. I can call myself an extensive traveler. I don't think I've covered more than 30% of this vast country that it is. But I have been venturing out for hikes, treks, just going out, exploring a new part, finding a new hideout. So I love doing all of that. Obviously, post-COVID, that part has taken a backseat. But what I continue to do is I read a lot of books. I do Netflix. I love watching documentaries. I work out a little extra on the weekends because weekdays are a little tired. So my time in gym or the swimming pool increases. And I do spend a lot of time in, upping my game in my career. So I read and I would try to find whatever can add value to me as an economist. Having said that, I think these are fairly common things. What, as an Indian, I have an opportunity to do is that I mentor an underprivileged kid. She's a girl child. I've been working with her for about 3 years now, and I spend my weekends trying to teach her, but also not really academics, but talk to her about the issues. The issues that underprivileged kids face in India are very different difficult to understand. It could be from the parents, it's from the society, it's from the lack of money, it's from the standard of living, it's what it does to your the way you perceive yourself, your self-image, body image, all of it. So I do counsel her on that. And I think that is a very different opportunity that you can have only if you live in an underdeveloped or a developing country. Because when I was in London, there was nothing I could do for the society. Everybody seemed rich and well off. So I was like, oh, okay, there are no poor people here for me to help. But yeah, I think because I live in a country like that, I have an opportunity to give away something.
Well, thanks for the insights. I think one thing I need to clarify a little bit. I think there's also, I mean, on a different scale to India, obviously, but there is poverty in Europe as well. And
Sure.
People might not see it at first glance, because it's not always people lingering on the streets, but there is, of course, underprivileged children growing up with parents, for example, who are drug addicts. There are people without jobs, without perspective, and you can actually also get engaged and do some work for the community here. So there are opportunities as well, but I fully understand it's probably on a different scale to what you can do for society in a country like India. Yeah, so before we close our interesting discussion, do you have a question for me?
So I've already given you some insight on India, but from a Westerner's perspective, what do you think? Has the international perception of India evolved over time?
So my humble opinion on this, of course, would be that, first of all, yes, it has definitely evolved. I think in the past, it was very much driven by the typical stereotypes that you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation. It's Bollywood, it's the Taj Mahal, it's the spicy curries, and a lot of poverty, poor people lingering on the streets begging for money. Then it has, I think, kind of developed into India is the country with the IT specialists of the world. But also, this is not the entire story. Yeah. What I learned is there are a billion single stories that make up India, and you can never actually, when you speak about a country or a culture, generalize it. And what I must say I find most intriguing is understanding that in the end our lives are not so much different. You mentioned your weekends, what you would do, go for a hike, visit some other places. You're driven by a curiosity, you want to see the world, you want to understand things, you want to chill out on your couch, watch Netflix. I mean, this is very much the same to, I think, what we do as well. So understanding that there's so much more similarities between us, I think, is a crucial part. So I would like to conclude this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And there will be another episode on Culture Curious. Which country is not decided yet. It depends on which of my friends would like to volunteer next. So please stay tuned and see you in the next video.